podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Welcome to the 1905 podcast. Each week, Joe and I bring you our unfiltered takes on the highs, the lows, and everything in between, following the Blues from Gate 13 of the Matthew Harding stand. Let's hit the notes.
Good evening. The final whistle has just gone. It is Manchester City 1, Chelsea 1. And what did we learn from our new interim manager, Calum McFarlane? I've got to say, I was really disappointed with the team lineup. Then I found out there were some actual genuine injuries. But Gusto at left back and Buddy Shaw coming back into the team filled me with nothing but dread. And then to add on to that Jorgensen in goal, it really wasn't a good look. But I think that what was noticeable for me was how little Chelsea dilly-dallied at the back. There was a lot more longer passes from Jorgensen. He didn't look to play these silly little passes. There were obviously some that went out to Trev from goal kicks and things, but when we had possession that wasn't classed as a set piece, he wasn't looking to play to Badishaw's feet or Trev's feet. He was going much longer. Spreading the ball wide to Gusto and Achampong quite a lot, actually. I quite like that change straight away. That was pretty obvious. We weren't trying to be clever. I was impressed with Chop to start with him. I thought he had a very good game. That's more like the player that I think we saw at the start of the season and the back end of last year, where we thought we were getting something. I felt as though Twitch's performances when he's played, which wasn't often under Maresca, of late, were a bit weak. I thought he was particularly poor against Bournemouth, but tonight was a bit of a coming-of-age game. I thought he was really good. His tackle that he made on the halfway line for City's opener was fantastic. And I hate to say it, I'm going to say it because I don't think people will call it out because Chelsea drew the game, but Josh wins that ball on the halfway line when City are breaking on us. It's retrieved, I think, from James, who pays it back to Buddy Ashil, who just kicked it, I think, straight to Silva. And they scored straight from that one pass through. Buddy Ashil's tracking back. Obviously, he doesn't clear the ball for a second time, and Ryan just smashed it into the top corner. Now, there'll be those that say I'm being a little bit unfair on that. I don't think I am. I think there is a lot to do, but it's another misplaced pass. When he didn't have to do it, he could have retrieved possession and gone back to the goalkeeper. Just kept possession at that point, not be rushed into taking a one-touch pass into the middle of the pitch where City are their most dynamic and strongest. However, what I will say, to be balanced and fair, I think Badishil overall didn't have a bad game. I thought he was maybe culpable for that goal slightly, but certainly didn't have a bad performance, so I will give credit where it's due. Malo Gusto, I thought, probably had his best game for a long, long time. I'll come to his assist for the goal for Chelsea in a minute, but I thought his overall play was very, very good. I think what I will say is I don't think any of these players suddenly had this, like, oh, I'm free from Maresca about them. But they definitely played a little bit freer. There was a sense of not being restricted to particular role or position. And I felt as though players were moving around the pitch quite freely. So what I will say about that first half from Chelsea, it was pretty diabolical. And Chris and our Chris, Smudger, as we call him on our WhatsApp group, he made a very good point, and I do tend to agree with him when he said that playing for a 0-0 up until half-time wasn't a terrible tactic if you could do it. Obviously, City scored, I think, around the 39th, 40th minute, which kind of set Chelsea back a little bit, but it wasn't the worst game plan in the world. It just looked terrible when you've just sacked your manager. And we were sort of resorting to just playing longer balls up to João Pedro, who didn't hold the ball up very well at all. But I don't think he got a great service, if I'm honest. He didn't help himself at times, João Pedro, but I don't think we were helping him. Just sort of aimless balls up to his chest, and he's got, a defender or two around him to try and bring it down and bring people into play. There were moments where he could have done better, but I felt as though it just wasn't a good look for Chelsea. We weren't creating anything. We didn't look at all in the game. Obviously, Esteval had a half chance. I mean, it really was a half chance, which was smothered really, really quickly. But other than that, we didn't create a thing in the first half. And you could argue that we nullified City quite well. Obviously, Haaland hits the post with a great shot, whipping it in from the left-hand side. Did they have much more than that, really, chance-wise? Not that I can think of. There might have been one or two half chances, but really nothing of note. And I think Chelsea probably would have come away from that first half feeling pretty good had it gone in at 0-0. Now, as I come on to Chelsea's central midfield, it's really worrying that we've got a player in Reece James who's come through the academy and he's basically a natural right back, is outshining his partner in there, Enzo Fernandez. I thought Enzo was terrible. I'm not going to lie. I thought Fernandez had an awful game. And I thought that what summed him up, actually, was about the 85th, 6th minute, and we got the ball in a really good position on Man City's left-hand side. And we had like 3 against 2 or 4 against 3. Forgive me, because I can't quite remember exactly what happened. But we had really good possession on the halfway line, and he kicked it straight out of play for a Man City throw-in. I just thought to myself, that just about sums up Chelsea. That really does. And you've got Reece James in there, battling away, fantasy footwork. He wins a truckload of tackles. He's got a great way to pass to slip through to the centre forwards. Hits great crisp-forward passes. Keeps it simple when he needs to. Tracks his runners into the box. Did that a few times in the first half. And you've got Enzo, who just sort of funnies around. I ain't going to lie, I wasn't impressed with him tonight. I'll get onto his goal in a moment, but yeah, I was disappointed in him. If you were going to tell me that someone had been bought for £107 million, it wouldn't have been Enzo Fernandez. It certainly would have been Reece James. As I move on to Pedro Neto, I think he's had one of his worst games I've seen him have. He's obviously had a New Year's shave, new Neto, new him, and diabolical performance. His missed chance at the start of the second half, I mean, that really isn't a difficult chance. He just needs to basically dig it into the bottom corner and it's a goal. It's a simple goal. In fairness, I've just criticised him, but Enzo Fernandez did very well for that. He got himself in a very good position. He cuts the ball back really nicely for Neto, and he just booms it over the bar. But that's not why he played bad. He was awful. He kept kicking it out of play. He kept misplacing passes. Never went past anybody once. It was a travesty of a game. I mean, he seemed to just lose all his spark, all his magic. And, he was a real disappointment tonight, sadly. Esteban got the hook at half-time, and I was just really deflated about that. I think he's being levelled a bit from friends and other people I know. So, is he any good? This kid's magic. Please, this kid is going to be so good. There's no need to put any pressure or any real negativity around this boy. He's going to be unbelievable. But for some reason, just the way we set up in the second half, they felt as though they wanted to go a different way. I've been tempted to take Neto off and put Esteban on, but maybe they were just thinking that Neto might do a bit more work defensively, which I can understand completely. But if you want to win games, maybe that was the way to go. But because you had Palmer there, probably thought, do we want 2 luxury players on the field? I don't know. But as we get on to the second half, I really thought the changes that Calum McFarlane made were fantastic, and he deserves all the credit for changing it, because we would definitely not have seen that under Enzo Maresca. There's no way he'd have gone to a back 3 and put 2 wing backs out there and kind of, not say gone for it. He wasn't like over cavalier, but he made a statement that he wanted to try and win the game. In all honesty, he got exactly what he deserved, which was that equalising goal in the 90th minute? Maybe just ticked over to 91, 92. And what a brilliant bit of play from Malo Gusto. Obviously, he squared up his defender. He just chipped it around him. Obviously, Reece James makes a lovely run, actually. And I thought, is this going to slip him in? But he had the confidence to whip that ball into a really dangerous area. And it sort of gets put through. I think Delap swings a leg at it. Neto swings a leg at it. And it comes off somebody. And Enzo kind of gets tripped up by himself and has a little shot. It's parried by Donnarumma, and he gets it at the second attempt. And it was no more than we deserved on the night. And it was just really pleasing. I think all Chelsea fans, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm being a bit pessimistic, but I think most Chelsea fans would have looked at that game today Seeing we've got an under-21 manager playing against Pep Guardiola. We've got an under-strength team. Players playing a little bit out of position at times. And we've come away. And also, remember, there's no Caicedo on that team as well. And we've come away with a 1-1 draw. It's valiant. It shows that there is some kind of character and some heart in that side. There were moments in the second half where I felt like, is Palmer enjoying this? He had a face like thunder at times. But you know what? I thought Cole Palmer had one of his poorest games. And people may not have even noticed. But I thought Cole Palmer was poor tonight. I didn't think he played well in the first half. He played too deep, which again, he's probably been asked to do that. Fill a role for the side. But I did feel in the second half that nothing really improved. He was certainly playing higher up. And he played a great ball through for when Liam Delap pushes, forgive me, because I can't say his name, the Man City defender into the hoardings. He played a great through ball for Delap there. But that swing and a miss just before Chelsea scored the equaliser. And I just didn't think he was in the game. I thought he was quite subdued, pretty poor by his standards. And when it comes to someone having a bit of guile and a bit of composure in front of goal, you always think it's going to be Cole Palmer. And maybe he's not quite back to his old self yet. He hasn't looked brilliant, I wouldn't have said, since he's been back. Scored a goal against Everton in open play. He got a penalty against Bournemouth, but he hasn't really been at his scintillating best as of yet. He missed a couple of chances against Aston Villa when Chris and I thought it was easy to score at times, but there was no real spark about him today. He played okay. He's probably 6 out of 10. And when you go to places like Man City, you need everybody to be at an 8. If you're going to beat that sort of team and be a really strong contender for a league title, everybody needs to play, at an 8 at the very least. And I think Chelsea had a few players today that were a little bit below that. But we certainly made it a really competitive match. And Man City will be absolutely fuming with themselves because they weren't at their best, I don't think. But they did make it difficult for us. They got back towards the end of the game when they were 1-0 up, and they were making sort of 2 banks of 5 when we had possession. And it was really hard for us to break through it. But I think what Man City will do, they will give you a chance. And we did capitalise on that. And I think the way we did it was brilliant. And even though it looks a bit of a scruffy goal near the end, the football to do it, to get there, was fantastic. And Gusto deserves all the credit for that. And I think Chris gave him a bit of a shoe-in on our last podcast. But I think that when credit is due, I think we should always say it. And like I said about Badiashile, I think that he was pretty good tonight, considering the way he's been playing of late, and maybe a mistake for the goal. But I think overall he deserves a little bit of credit. I think we should always do that on the podcast. I felt as though Liam Delap possibly had his best 10-minute cameo for Chelsea. Coming off the bench, I don't think he's been very good for us at all this year, or this season. But I feel as though we certainly saw something that was a bit more like his old self. There was a couple of great runs. He played a very good pass when he came on immediately through to, I think, Cole Palmer. And there were just moments. His movement was good. He had a good shot, obviously, that was saved. But it just felt a bit more like the old self. And fingers crossed, we need him. We need him to go and win games for us. There's no point us bashing him all the time. We need him to be good for Chelsea. And hopefully that's a sign of things to come, that he can be a bit more useful than he has been for the first sort of 5 or 6 months of his Chelsea career so far, which has been injury-ridden, and when he has played, has been fairly disgusting on the performance side of things. I was really pleased with Jiro Hato's, again, little cameo too. I know his first touch came over to him and he miscontrolled it, went straight out for a throw-in, but actually after that, he makes a really good tackle in the Man City box to break up what was almost a certain goal for them. And I thought, as the game progressed, as a wing-back, I thought he looked, he hasn't got to do as much defending there. Go back to Alonso when he played for us. Not the best defender, but by a word was he good going forward. And look, we don't know what's going to happen with regards to the Chelsea manager. I think I know what it's going to be. And I'm not sure what system he's going to play or how he's going to do it yet. But if Chelsea do decide to play with some kind of wing-back role, I think that might suit Hato down to the ground, because defensively, maybe not brilliant at the moment. Not awful, but lots to learn. But going forward, I think perhaps that might be his best sort of opportunity to get into this Chelsea team, because he's clearly got oodles and oodles of talent, and we just haven't seen any of it because, again, for some reason, Enzo Maresca just stopped playing him. And that's what's been the real frustration, because what Calum McFarlane showed tonight in 90 minutes, or in 45 minutes, certainly in the second half, was that he was prepared to trust his players. And I just felt as though Maresca, maybe towards the end of his stint at Chelsea, lost that faith. And there's been a lot of shit thrown around with him and obviously the club and what have you in the last few days. And you can pick a side if you want to. I wouldn't necessarily go one way or the other. I think both sides are probably trying to save face a little bit. And, you know, everyone's trying to cover their own arse. But it was refreshing to see that we had some players out there tonight who haven't played a lot of games for us, in Achampong and obviously Hato and even Jorgensen, who, to be fair, I think all three cover themselves in not to say glory, but they all certainly stood up to the test of Man City, which is probably the ultimate test in football at the moment. In any landscape, I think no one wants to play Man City at the Etihad. I know Chris is absolutely dying to get on here and give you his views and thoughts on the game. I'm going to wrap mine up there and let him come on and give his thoughts and how he felt about the situation of today. I just want to wish everybody a massive Happy New Year. A huge thank you from Chris and I. I know we did a 100th episode last time out, but I think the managerial change caught us a little bit unawares, and maybe we didn't quite get around to saying thank you properly. And yeah, huge thank you to everybody that's messaged since our 100th episode dropped last week. And yeah, we're very, very proud of what we've done, and we're very, very thankful for everybody who's got in touch. And like I say, please keep doing it, because we've had so many in the last week. It's been fantastic to see and hear all your passionate thoughts and how you're also into it. Some people that have only been supporting Chelsea for one season, some that have been supporting Chelsea for 30 or 40 years. The difference is fantastic, and giving those people that haven't supported Chelsea for a long time a real insight into how it can be to support our fantastic club. So yeah, I'm going to leave it there for tonight, and I will be back to speak on our new manager in a moment.
Calum McFarlane, remember the name, future England manager. Who knows? But I tell you what a brilliant job he has done to get Chelsea a result there and put in a performance that really, by the end of it, I felt really proud of. And football's a funny old game, and like Joe, I was completely going into it thinking we've got absolutely no chance here, and it could be ugly. If I'm being honest, is probably my thought going into it, and it's sort of damage limitation, I thought. And almost as the game was progressing, I had this similar frustration I seem to have every single time we go to the Etihad, which is that it's almost like we lack belief. And belief feels like a word that rings true today, because it's like we lack belief, but I've actually come out of the game having a bit of belief, and I'll come on to that a bit later. But the same last season, wasn't it? We went 1-0 up there last year, had chances to put the game to bed, and then didn't take them, didn't really feel clinical enough, and then came out of it losing. And it felt similar in that sort of first half an hour of the game, where you got forward and you thought a little bit more decisive, a little bit more, again, your belief, but we're being a bit more clinical, a bit more sure of ourselves. We're just almost like, we're in their half. What do we do now? But what I loved most, and Joe talked about it there, but I've got to repeat it, because I think it really was the story of the game for me, was what he did at half time, and how refreshing it was seeing Chelsea come out, effectively going to a back three, doing something different, not being what is a very common thing I think you see with a lot of big club managers, which is being really stubborn to their approach, to their style of play. And it was the thing about Maresca that I think frustrated Chelsea fans. And this isn't a Maresca slagging podcast today, but all I think is it's a common thing you see with a lot of leading managers, is that now we win or lose, but playing my way, and everything else goes out the window. And I think it was interesting to see someone like Calum McFarlane come in and go, it's not really working. I can't see this. How are we going to get back into this? Let's try something different. Let's get on the front foot and give them something different to think about. You see it so often from other teams playing against Chelsea, don't you? Like the amount of teams who sit up against Chelsea with a back three, because they know that we struggle effectively with a back five to play against. Leeds went up to Man City quite recently, just before they beat us, didn't they? And they went to a back three at half time, basically did a very similar thing, came out from 2-0 down, got back to 2-2 and ended up losing it 3-2, but gave City a big fright. And it was so great to see McFarlane do that and effectively have Pep scratching his head by the end of the game and giving him a shake of the hand. So I think massive credit to McFarlane has to be given. A key part of that change, of course, was Andre Santos. Joe messaged me as soon as he sent me his voice note saying, I can't believe I forgot to mention Andre Santos, so please make sure you do. And of course I will. He was superb. Absolutely superb today. I think you saw in him just what a brilliant footballer he is. What a brilliant footballer. We thought when he signed for us, and obviously we'll talk about Rosenior soon, who effectively is like the manager's son. Those two got on so well at Strasbourg. And he was an all-action, crash the box, attacking midfielder, a little bit like an Enzo Fernandez, I guess, for them. What you saw today was a completely other side of his game where he was dropping in effectively on almost as deep as a penalty spot at times to take balls completely fearlessly from the goalkeeper, from the centre-backs on the half-turn with the likes of Haaland up his backside and all the other great players like Foden he's got around him. But he did it time and time again, was so good, driving us forward. Every part of his game I loved. Every facet of his game, his passing, his carrying of the ball, some of his tackling, his heading ability. He's a really, really good footballer. And I think one of the things we'll talk more about what we think some of the things we might change in the second half of the season. I think if you put in your betting slip on one thing, it's that Andre Santos will be playing a lot more football than he did in the first half of the season. I'd bet my house on that. Final word on McFarlane from the game. I just thought it was a really, really nice touch from Reece James at the end, getting him in front of the Chelsea fans. He sort of pushed him forward. Lovely moment, really, with the fans there. I know quite a few fans who go to those away days, and I think today would have felt like a bit of a slog going up there thinking we're under hiding to nothing, but the fans were brilliant. You could hear them. They're the only fans you really could hear all day. And for them to get that moment with Enzo Fernandez scoring in front of them and then all the players and then McFarlane come over at the end is exactly what you want to see. A reminder that, through the good or the bad, we're all Chelsea fans. We're all in it for the long haul. There's no escaping it. And yeah, I just thought it was a really nice moment, and massive credit to Reece, who, running out of superlatives to say about Reece James as a footballer. He is just, what can't he do? And I thought today just led from the front in every way you'd want to see as a captain in that second half. And yeah, it was just brilliant. In terms of the performance as a whole, I don't think that I can add a huge amount on from what Joe said, really. I thought Joe summed it up really well. I think the biggest thing for me that it probably proposes is a few questions for the new man watching it. Let's say his name, Liam Rosenior. It'll be him, won't it? We know that. But in how you get the best out of this Chelsea side, I think the back three part is really interesting that we saw. I think if you feel as a group of players, you maybe don't have the strongest centre-backs, and I think probably that's how we feel about Chelsea, let's be honest, then going to a back three is a really smart move. Because effectively, you provide an extra piece of protection, you put an extra man in there. And when you look at the personnel that we have, to be able to play a good back three, you really need the right players to be able to play on the right and left centre-back. And I think actually Chelsea have them. I think right centre-back, Reece could play anywhere really in this team, but I think you're probably more likely to see him if we went to a back three as a right centre-back, which we saw a lot. We saw a fair amount actually under Tuchel. People forget that. Obviously, he ended up at right wing back with, obviously in the Champions League final, but quite a lot in that season. He also played at right centre back with Azpilicueta doing the right wing back job. And I think Reece could do that really, really well. I think on the other side, there's a number of people who could do that. But interestingly, Hato, who Joe obviously mentioned there, I went on an Ajax podcast, funny enough, as a guest before we played them in the Champions League. And obviously we talked about Hato, and I asked them what they thought of him and where they thought his best position was. And they actually said they felt strongly he was best as the left of a three. and they compared him to Nathan Ake, who obviously has played that role quite effectively at times, and Azpilicueta. So neither of whom are obviously renowned for their height, and probably would struggle height-wise in a traditional kind of back four setup. But as a left centre-back, they thought that's where he could do his best work in the three. So that's interesting, but I actually saw he could do a job at wing-back as well, and it would be an interesting use of assets there. Cucurella also has played both left centre-back and left wing-back when he was at Brighton. So, yeah, we are guessing completely there. He may well not do that. He may well play back four. But I think the hope you'd have is there is a bit of flexibility. And we see that Chelsea are a bit more, versatile in that approach, which was something I kind of was crying out for by the end of the Enzo era. And then the other part, obviously, is Cole Palmer. As Joe said, wasn't his best game. I think that the big thing that I look at with Cole, and I said on the last podcast that I think it's the number one job for the new manager is work at how to get the best out of Cole Palmer. And I've always had this sort of feeling that actually he's best off the right. And I think it kind of causes, it feels like a controversial opinion that, because people are, oh no, he does all his damage in that central zone. But actually, in that first season under Pochettino, he did do that, but he started off the right. So he'd be on the right of the three, with Malo Gusto most of the time bombing on his right-hand side, which created all the space for him to come inside and then do his damage. And if you think back to that PSG game in the summer, which we often do, think about his positions in all the big moments there. Is coming in off the right, either to carry the ball through the right channel, slipping in that pass for João Pedro, or obviously his two brilliantly taken goals, all through the right-hand side. Think about that Conference League final as well. Where does he create both assists? It's on that right-hand side. I just wonder if, with a different setup, you'd need a bombing fullback outside of him to create that space. But I wonder if that would be something they maybe look at. And again, that could be in a back three setup with wing backs. It could be in a 4-3-3 setup. So it could be that you have a three in the middle of Casado, Enzo, Andre Santos, perhaps Reece James, whatever it might be. And then you give Palmer that kind of, like, you're starting on the right-hand side position, but obviously with a huge license to go and drift into that kind of central right-hand side zone, which is where he really does his damage. I just think that since he moved to a proper number 10, which was effectively last season under Maresca, he obviously started like a train, was brilliant up until Christmas. But I think teams more and more just put bodies all around him. And in the middle of the pitch, he's just surrounded. So he's obviously got, any time he's got a defensive midfielder right up his arse, he turns, he's got two big centre-backs staring down him as well. And I think it's quite easy to get lost in the Premier League in that area, and it's always harder to get him the ball as much as you'd want. And I wonder if off the right, he'd often end up being one-on-one with the fullback, those kind of positions. He'd still drift. But I think when he's drifting, it's a bit harder to pick him up. So one to watch, again, completely guessing in terms of what we might do. But it would be maybe the one area that if I was in charge, I'd maybe look at just being a bit more flexible about how we use Cole Palmer. So yeah, one to watch. But I thought that, it wasn't his best game, but he'll be fine. He'll be absolutely fine. Likewise, Esteval. He was notably did not look happy at the end of the game, by the way. Not a great look for him, actually. There's a clip going around where Craig McFarlane kind of goes to walk past him to give him a pat on the back, and Esteval quite clearly blanks him. So not a great look from Esteval there, but he's a kid. He will grow up and he'll get past it. And yeah, I think my final word on the game will be that we're still alive, that there's a long way to go in this season. I think a performance like that gives you hope that they're not dead. There is clearly character in the group. It's the league table just gets sillier and sillier every time we look at it, doesn't it? Like we've not moved somehow in the last sort of two games, but it's just got tighter and tighter in the pack. It was looking at the teams who are like 15th and they're like 5 points behind us. It's absolutely insane. So the most important thing is that Chelsea start well under the new manager and pick up some wins and try and get a bit of traction going again in our league campaign, because do that and you actually can pull away a little bit fairly quickly. don't do it and you're just going to get dragged right down into the pack, which, as we'll talk about with Rosenior, would just be the worst possible thing for him. So, yeah, I'll hand back to Joe to talk about him and our thoughts, and I'll obviously come back in a moment and talk about my thoughts on the new man. But yeah, feeling really buoyant about that. When that 94th minute goal went in, I was going absolutely crazy in the living room, like many of you I'm sure were. And yeah, thank God it didn't get disallowed for offside, because I don't know if you noticed that, but it was definitely getting checked by VAR for an offside. And I'm not sure my heart would have taken that moment, but luckily it wasn't. And Chelsea thoroughly deserved, in my opinion, the point that we got. So onwards, well done, Craig McFarlane. Let's talk about who's next.
Chelsea's new manager hasn't yet been announced officially, and we don't know for definite who it's going to be. I'm going to pretty much say that it's about 95% done that it's Liam Rosenior. And I think as time of recording, he's already on a flight to London to sort out his contract. I think the hold-up has possibly been that Chelsea have been trying to find a new manager for Strasbourg, obviously being under the Blue Co umbrella, which is, I'm going to say it now, I had a chat with Chris in between the Man City game and our 100th episode, and I actually find it disgusting. And there were a lot of Premier League teams that have these multi-club systems going on, and I know that some people won't even realise that even clubs like Brentford, Aston Villa, Everton, Crystal Palace, Man United, Man City, the list goes on and on and on. They've all got some kind of multi-club ownership going on. And I just think that if I was a Strasbourg fan, you could argue that Chelsea will get them loan players and it's maybe elevated their league positioning a little bit, but you're not owned by yourselves. And if I was a Strasbourg fan, I would be so pissed off. Not the fact that Liam Rosenior is leaving. I'm sure there's people there that like him. I'm sure there's people there that hate him, a bit like any other football club in the world. But I just find this way of new football is just a little bit scary, and I don't like it. I really, really don't like it. It's not going to change. Unless the rules change, it won't change. And I just find it really, really sad that Strasbourg, who are, okay, they haven't been doing brilliantly of late in Liga, but they are a good team, managed really well by Liam Rosenior, who's done a really good job with them. He's built up all this trust and what have you. And now he just goes to Chelsea and they have to start all over again themselves just because Chelsea want a new manager. And I just don't like it. I'm going to go on record that I really think it's poor. And whatever you think about Liam Rosenior, and I've been quite upfront about this with Chris, I don't think it's a good appointment, personally. But in the short term, maybe he changes something, but I still see Chelsea within 2 years changing the manager yet again. I think he's going to be on a really, really short leash. If Chelsea start, he changes the formation and he gets a little bit of crowd bounce early on, then it could go quite well for him. It's when you play against top teams with top managers, you get tactically outfought. I think that's where you earn your money. And Liam Rosenior is still pretty much a rookie. And I think he's played some pretty good football with Strasbourg. And I think overall the feeling towards him is quite positive around their fan base. But you're talking about the Premier League and the best teams in the world, and I will be behind him 100%. I am not going to start off his reign, if he does become our manager, with negativity and doubt. But I think it's no better than appointing Enzo Maresca, personally. However, if he's prepared to play a team and he doesn't quite get it right tactically, and I'm a bit like Calum McFarlane tonight, he goes out there and then changes the formation and he can prove that he's a coach that can adapt on the fly, I will be fully behind him. I think my biggest bugbear with Maresca was that he played pretty much one way the whole way through the game. Occasionally he'd say, right, Cucurella, you go and invert. And then a bit later on he might say, Gusto, you go and invert. But that's about as tactically aware as he was. We didn't really change anything. If the game was being lost or drawn, we never really changed it to go and win the match. And all I hope is that our new manager can come in and change things up when they need changing. And I think all the stories you're hearing about the ownership and Maresca, I don't think that's going to go away. And I don't think that Liam Rosenior is going to have everything his own way. There's talk of Maresca falling out with the medical team because he wanted to play players for longer and they wouldn't allow him to. There's also talk of him maybe being asked to play players on rotation, like I mentioned a few weeks ago. Players like Badiashile, Tosin, for example, who kept coming to the side randomly on the back of terrible performances and still getting minutes in this team. And Maresca saying, I don't want to play them, I want to play these players, and not being allowed to. Now, if that does continue to happen with a new manager, then I think it's a really bad look. I said on the podcast last week, that can't be a thing. And sadly, I think it might be. We'll soon find out, because if Liam Rosenior gets this job and in 12 months' time, 18 months' time, he's still there, and he comes up and starts saying things like, I wanted to do this with this player, but the medical team wouldn't let me. I wanted to do things with this player, but the sporting directors kept asking me to rotate those players around. Then you know full well who's in charge. I think Paul Merson has been very vocal tonight. You know, he's a Chelsea fan. And he said, you're not a Chelsea manager. You're just a coach. You're simply just a coach who doesn't even pick the team. Or certainly not the whole starting 11 in the first place every single game. And that is never going to win you anything. It's never really going to win you round to the Chelsea supporters. If they start hearing that and it comes out that it's true, I think that's a disgrace, quite frankly. And I just really hope that whoever comes in, they are not a yes man and they are prepared to go against the board. And they are prepared to stand up on their own 2 feet and say, that's not how it's going to go. I think within all football clubs, there'll be an essence of, you know, is the January transfer window coming up? Can we get this player some minutes, get him in the shop window because he hasn't played for a few games? I think that happens at all football clubs. I really do. Not just Chelsea, but it's how you go about it, what sort of state your team is in. Chelsea at the moment need to win games. And I think we shouldn't get carried away because we've had 1 win in 8 games, and that's a good point tonight. We can go away being pretty happy with ourselves, and it gives Liam Rosenior something to build on. But he's the one that needs to be making those decisions, not the sporting directors. He's the one that needs to be speaking to the medical department and saying about certain players. But also, I think there are players out there that should be demanding they feel okay, their bodies are okay, and playing through a little bit of pain mid-season is not something new. It's been going on since time began, and these players are paid an awful a lot of money to perform for their football clubs, and it's no point Reece James being mollycoddled by Chelsea, playing 1 game every 3, and then Thomas Tuchel taking him for 2 international friendlies and playing him for 180 minutes into the ground, and then coming back to Chelsea and then playing 1 every 3. There has to be an element of, come on, let's get real about this. We're the ones paying his fucking wages. Let's not give him to an England manager that's going to, like I say, run him into the ground for 2 matches against Albania and Ukraine or something. But I get it. You know, Reece James is the player that we most wanted back playing on a regular basis. And I think that medical department has been brought in and they've been given the description of make sure that our players aren't overplayed and they're not overworked and they can play as many games of football as possible. But I think there does come the extreme where you go completely too far the other way, where they're not playing enough in the big games or the most important games. And I think that's where we need to find the balance. And hopefully, as time goes on and the owners learn and the sporting directors learn, that we might see some kind of agreement between manager, player and medical department. But yeah, again, until it's really announced that it's Rosenior, I'll hold firm. But I think, like I say, this multi-club model that I mentioned at the start of this voice note, I think is poor, and I really dislike it a lot. But look, it is what it is. We can't change it. But I tell you now, if Chelsea was suddenly bought under the umbrella of somebody else, I wouldn't be a Chelsea fan anymore. And you have my word on that. Good luck, Liam. If it's you, mate, fair play. You got a lot of work to do.
I'll start on that multi-club model point because it's probably the most salient one at this point, isn't it? With Chelsea now very likely to be bringing in the manager from their sister club. I think the first thing is that it's not a Chelsea thing in terms of where the real problem lies. It just shouldn't be allowed. The governing bodies just shouldn't allow you to be able to have sister clubs. And I just feel really sorry, actually, for the supporters of those clubs like Strasbourg and many other clubs out there who are in this position. In all honesty, the way the Blue Co are operating Strasbourg, you'd argue, is fairly pioneering. And they're almost doing what other clubs, if they're not doing, probably could and should be doing, which is effectively developing young players that you think could be future signings for Chelsea. They even went as far, and I'm sure it's not the first, but obviously brought in Ciso from Brighton. There was that confusion in the summer, wasn't there, of was he a Chelsea signing? It was no, he's a Blue Co signing going to Brighton, but with the potential of a future Chelsea move. There are many players that Chelsea have done this for. Andre Santos, who we mentioned earlier, obviously had an amazing loan there. That's maybe the more typical kind of experience, but now we have players like Amiga, who is the current Strasbourg captain, will be joining Chelsea in the summer. We have Sarr, the centre-back, who effectively was a Strasbourg player. Chelsea liked him. They brought him into Chelsea and then have sent him back for another year on loan. And then you've got Penders and Pires and all these other links between the two clubs. And it won't end. And I just feel really, really sorry for Strasbourg fans. And frankly, I'll talk more, I think, on a future podcast about the Chelsea protests that are planned from supporters. I think it's ahead of the Burnley game in a couple of weeks. I'll give my views on that probably near the time. But one thing that you absolutely do have the right to protest, in my mind, is if you're a Strasbourg fan and any fan of the club in that situation, because it really, you're effectively putting a ceiling above the potential of the club. And of course, they've had, well, I think they've been quite vocal, haven't they, as fans, that they have improved under the Blue Co model, but it feels like it's done with it's tainted, and there is a clear ceiling above which they'll probably never get. Because I use the example of, imagine if we're in that situation, or if Cole Palmer was at Strasbourg, he'd have gone to Chelsea at the end of his first season, and that's kind of must be a horrible feeling for a supporter of that club to know they've got a guy doing really well, striker at the moment, an Argentinian lad, and if he does really well, he'll be at Chelsea in a season or two. So yeah, don't love the model. And of course, now we've taken it to the next level by effectively using it to help develop young managers. So let's talk about Liam Rosenior. And obviously it's the talking point in football right now. Everyone's talking about him, understandably. What you can say, well, I think you can, the way I split is there are things that you can say with confidence, and there's things that you can say with no confidence. And I'll start with the things you can say with confidence. And everyone saying this kind of stuff, I think, is completely fair enough. 100% yes, he lacks top level experience, and therefore the risk is massive. I think it's a key certainty, and this is the biggest problem with the appointment for me, and it's the reason that I warned against it in the last podcast, is that he's going to meet immediately under pressure, and if it goes wrong, it will go wrong very fast. He'll have no credit in the bank that you'd have if you appointed, for example, a Cesc Fabregas, who Chelsea fan, who'd be similarly inexperienced, but has that immediate rapport with Chelsea fans, is obviously a big name footballer that helps as well. He doesn't have that. Likewise, if we'd gone for a more experienced manager, he doesn't have that back catalogue of good performance that's going to really help him. So it's a huge risk from the club in that respect. And it's also a massive, it's a risk, but it's a massive, it could make a challenge for the club because it's the one that sparks the most backlash. Fans already dislike the club multi-club model perception. They certainly don't like some areas of the model that Joe talks about that has this idea that he might be a yes man and he's an internal appointment. And I think if it starts to go wrong, it will go wrong very, very quickly, and it could get a little bit ugly around, I think, just the general feel of supporters around the club, which would be really damning and could be really derailing to the season. I think all of those things are just fact, and you can't doubt. The things that you can't say with confidence, though, is that he won't do a good job, because we don't know that. We really don't know that. And everyone's saying he's clueless and he'll be rubbish and this, like, let's see. And I always have that view when a new manager joins Chelsea. I was saying this to Joe, actually, off pod, that some of our best ever managers, I didn't want to join Chelsea. When Frank Lampard left and Thomas Tuchel joined, he was just about towards the bottom of the list of managers I wanted. I'd seen some stuff that had been a bit against him in PSG, and I just really wasn't keen on him. Within 2 weeks, I liked him. Within 2 months, I loved him. You just don't know. I was equally not hugely excited about Antonio Conte. He came in, 2 weeks liked him, 2 months loved him, And of course, those guys are different. They had a different back catalogue of work, but every manager starts somewhere, and let's just give him a chance. That's the one thing I would say for Chelsea fans, is just be open-minded and let's see what he does. I think there are reasons to be positive, and I think that we saw that in that second half display at Man City. What it was a reminder of for me was that Chelsea have been quite boring to watch for the last year to 18 months. And we talked to Maresca and the fact that he's been absolutely brilliant in those really big games. And we've had some really good big game performances. But in many of the rest, even when we've won games, it's been turgid and a really difficult watch. And what was striking at times in the Man City game, and I don't think it was perfect by any means, but just seeing us play on the front foot a little bit and have a go at them and have runners in behind and, start with a bit more of an attacking lineup. That he changed it at half time, but I like the fact that he'd gone with Esteval and Palmer and Neto and João Pedro. Like, he hadn't shut up shop. He realised it wasn't working. He changed it at half time. I think the unknowns are, can he get us playing better football that we as fans enjoy? I said this on the pod before. Football's an entertainment business. I should be looking forward to watching my beloved Chelsea play and think it's going to be fun to watch. It hasn't been for a while. So if we can get a bit of that, I think he'll get some goodwill. I think there's quite a few players in the squad that will be excited by the change. Quite a few that we've already mentioned actually on this podcast, because I think Cole Palmer will be excited to maybe get a bit more freedom and try and find a way to get him back to his best. It's very notable that there was a radio silence from him on social media. There was no thank you message from Palmer for Maresca. Quite few, actually, and I don't like to overread into these things. There were a few really nice ones from Levi Colwill, from Reece James, a couple of others, but not as many as you often see. And it was well publicised, actually, that someone brought up the message that Cole Palmer put out there when Pochettino left the club, and it was a really, really warm and long message, actually, about how he'd kind of made his dreams come true and would really miss him. There was nothing from Maresca. So he's one maybe to kind of keep an eye on. But there's loads of others too. Andre Santos played his best football under Rosenior at Strasbourg, as we mentioned earlier. He'll be excited. I think a few of these players have been a bit out in the cold, like Hato, who'll probably feel he's been massively underused. He'll be pleased. I think Chimpong will probably see this as a bit of a fresh slate as well. It's great to see him start the last couple. He just hasn't been playing enough football. And you wonder if someone like Rosenior will look at him and say, he's your best centre-back. He should be starting every game. I don't care how old he is. Again, I don't know. None of us know what's going to happen here, but I can say that it's a blank slate and it'll be interesting. Why have Chelsea done it? Let's think of the rationale from their point of view. I think they'll see it as a relatively It's an easy appointment, of course. It's a cheap appointment as well, let's face it. They're not going to have to pay themselves any money out of the pocket. I think the contract itself will be as low as you're going to get probably for a Chelsea manager. And they might see it as low risk in the fact that the contract will be heavily weighted in their favour. If they decide it's not working in the summer, and if this second half of the season goes badly, then I don't think we have to fear as Chelsea fans that they're going to be stubborn and sit on it. I think that's the one thing that you can say. We thought Roman was harsh. These guys have almost taken it to the next level. And I'm not saying that they're appointing him thinking of him as a stopgap, because I don't think they would be thinking that. But I think they would almost have it in their minds that if he is, that's fine. And they'll go again and look in the summer. And then that list of names that we talked about in the last pod will come up to the surface again, and they'll look at who else is available and those kind of things. You've only got to look at Graham Potter. He came into the season sort of early in the season, mid-season, replaced Tuchel. He was gone by March? They didn't even give him to the end of the season. Didn't even give him. He got Chelsea to the quarterfinal of the Champions League to play Real Madrid. They didn't even let him play the Real Madrid game. So I don't think you have to worry with these owners that they'll sit on it if it isn't working. And again, we don't know if it will work. We hope it does. But if it doesn't, what you'll have cost is probably this season, which is still, as I said before, there's a lot left to play for, and hopefully we can surprise a few people. The other things I'd say about him, and I'm gonna just give you a couple of positives. He is very engaging, and I think when you watch him, I watched him as a pundit. He was a pundit here in the UK years ago. Did a lot of stuff, and he was always very, very engaging. I think when you see him interviewed and when he does the press conferences, and stuff like that, I think he'll win people over, and I think people will warm to him more quickly than they ever did with Maresca, which I think gives him a chance. I think if we start well, I think he'll have that on his side. I think he'll give you passion on the sideline, which to be honest, I think is in Chelsea managers. I think all fans like it in their managers, don't they? But I think you'll get that. You're not going to get that, feel of, well, does he care, that you sometimes got with Potter and even got with Pochettino to a point. It wasn't until we won that game in the last seconds against Man United under Pochettino that you really felt like he celebrated properly. It was always a bit like, oh, has he got a Spurs jumper underneath his tracksuit sort of thing? I don't think you'll get that with him. I think he's a likeable guy. And I'm going to say it, I'm a Londoner. There's something refreshing about having a London guy, a black London guy as well, which I think is really important for football and for the Premier League and for Chelsea, come in. And if he can do a great job and win us a trophy this year and get us in the Champions League, then whatever happens in the summer, I think that would be a great story and one that is there to be celebrated. So they're my positives. It's an interesting one. The downsides are obvious. He is incredibly inexperienced, probably underqualified for the job. And if it goes wrong, it'll go wrong very quickly and it could be very, very toxic. But if he gives us football that we get excited about, we're starting looking forward to watching our Chelsea play, looking forward to what he's going to do with the lineup, how he's going to get the best out of these, let's face it, some really talented footballers. I still stand by. I was thinking this in the last few days because it feels like Chelsea have been a laughing stock again this week, doesn't it? I think as Chelsea fans, we probably felt the heat more than any other. And I still stand by the fact that I believe Chelsea have the best, at least the fourth best squad in the Premier League. I think you go Man City, Arsenal and Liverpool ahead. I then think you put Chelsea. And that's even with the flaws in the squad that we've talked about, that we think we could do with a bit more experience and maybe need a centre-back, maybe need a striker. I still think that is the fourth best group of players in the Premier League. If he can make sure that he gets them playing and can get top 5, then there's a lot to be excited about still. There really is. Let's see. I imagine by the time you've listened to this, he may already have been appointed. I'm going to be open-minded. I'm really looking forward to seeing his first few games. And there is that thing, isn't there? We've been through it as Chelsea fans almost more than any other with manager changes in the last 20 years or so. You do always get that little bit of excitement where you think, okay, what are we going to see this time? How is it going to be different? And yeah, let's hope that somehow it's a work and it is one of the great footballing stories. It's unlikely, but I'm going to back him. And I'll leave you on that note. And it feels the perfect time to say that immortal line, every little thing's going to be all right. We'll see you after the Fulham game. Those were the Chelsea notes for this week. If you enjoyed the podcast, do us a favour and share it with a fellow Blue. And we'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave us a review wherever you're listening. Wherever you may be, stay carefree, and remember, every little thing's gonna be all right.